Hey y'all, Dr. Dana Gibbs here. I'm an integrative physician in North Texas where I help people address thyroid and other hormone imbalances. Today, I'm going to discuss some techniques and some supplements that you can use to combat chronic stress and elevated cortisol levels. Today's my husband's birthday, so I'm recording early, but go ahead and put questions in the comments and I'll catch up with these next time. If you're listening to this and you're not a physician, please keep in mind this stuff is complex, especially if you're not trained in scientific language and the specific way that doctors think about medical issues. Scientific proof is not nearly as black and white as people think. And in order to make treatment decisions for individual people, sometimes we have to consider evidence that's not nearly as absolute as we would like. This is where experienced and advanced medical training and consideration of the relative benefit versus risk comes into treatment recommendations. So this is not meant to be medical advice, and you should consult your own physician for any medical issues or diagnoses that you may have. Last week, I discussed how our brains perceive stress and how stress affects our bodies via our hormones. We also discussed how it's possible for our adrenal glands to get depleted of its nutrients and cofactors and raw materials that they need to keep running in high gear, making cortisol all the time. So this week, I want to talk about what can be done about this problem to try to ward off some of the downstream effects of stress on our bodies. And remember, mainstream medicine doesn't universally accept adrenal fatigue as a thing, but in general, it takes about 20 years for new ideas to be assimilated into the mainstream medical practice. So the first thing that you can do, of course, it sounds stupid, but it's reduce your stress. It's a little bit of a ridiculous thing for me to just say reduce your stress because many of us are in situations where that seems like an impossible or ridiculous thing to even consider, especially if you're still in residency or if you're in danger of losing your job or the like. That said, there are definitely things that can help you reduce your brain's perception of stress. Remember, how we talked about how your brain responds to stress, even if it's just worry or rumination about things that we can't control. So that part of stress is really created by our own brains, and we can definitely work to reduce that. So meditation absolutely helps redirect some of the 60,000 thoughts per day that our brain creates. So there are so many ways to access meditation these days through classes or apps like 10% Happier is a good one, or meditation teachers. Meditation upregulates your parasympathetic nervous system, which helps combat stress and is shown to lower cortisol levels. So consistency is the key here. You don't have to spend a long time, but 6 minutes twice a day has been shown to be profoundly helpful. Coaching is also, in my opinion, phenomenally helpful. For example, when you ask yourself, why is this happening to me? It's a completely unanswerable question and will generate endless thoughts, a loop of frustration, despair, and agony. But your brain keeps trying to close that loop because it doesn't like unanswered questions. Or it may come up with completely unhelpful answers like because you suck, because you're lazy, or other ridiculous things. Better to ask how questions like, how can I turn this situation to my advantage? Or how can I learn from this mistake I just made? These are the kinds of thought patterns a personal coach can help you uncover and improve. Of course, you can do self coaching, but in my opinion, it's really, really much more difficult to see yourself from the outside, and having a coach point out the lies that you're telling yourself can really be helpful. They can also reduce you beating yourself up and help replace that with self-compassion. And self-compassion does sound wimpy and more like self-pity, but it really isn't anything like that. Being your own best cheerleader instead of your own worst critic is really an amazing way to reduce your self-generated mental stress and be more productive. So there's all kinds of books on self-coaching and mindset and the like if you can't afford a one-on-one coach right now. But truly, if you're a doctor, you really can't afford not to get one. And I know not everybody has time, but hobbies that take you out of your head, like woodworking or making music or knitting or art or similar things are amazing stress relievers. And then movement of almost any kind. Exercise combats stress in two ways. First, it builds muscle, which then helps lower your blood sugars and reduce the need for all that elevated insulin that we discussed last week. Because working muscle doesn't need glucose to uptake sugar. It also directly improves your parasympathetic tone. But anaerobic workouts like high intensity interval training and weightlifting are actually much better than prolonged endurance cardio, which actually can increase people's stress. I mentioned last week that we all know stories about high level professional athletes who lose their periods. Well, that's all because of the high cortisol and stress that they're undergoing. So anti-inflammatory eating is another way. So elimination of sweetened foods that raise your insulin level, and beverages, and also avoiding processed carbs and processed high inflammatory vegetable oils in favor of coconut or avocado or olive oils for cooking can reduce the inflammatory effects of stress. And finally, sleep and then digital detox are really foundational ways to reduce the effects of stress. Avoiding alcohol, as well, TV, computer, smartphone use before bed. Those things may feel like they're helping you relax, but really studies show that higher nighttime cortisols and sleep disruption result from those things. And blue light, of course, decreases melatonin, which makes it harder to sleep. Trying a hot shower and low light before bed to help you relax instead. And then for me personally, breathing exercises and a particular kind of passive meditation called yoga nidra really helped me immensely when my mind is just churning away, but it's time to sleep. And it's important really to make a super all-out effort to get the recommended 8 hours of sleep a night. So getting up at 5 to go to the gym may be a good thing, but only if you were in bed by 9. All right. So then the second thing that I actually don't recommend is to try to reduce your cortisol output or suppress your adrenal glands through something called adaptogens. And these are herbs that have been shown to suppress adrenal cortisol production. So it sounds good, right? And ashwagandha is one that's really very popular, and I've actually tried it myself. But here's where I don't think those are really a great idea. So if you're anxious, part of the reason may be that your adrenals are having a hard time keeping up with the demand for cortisol that your stressful life requires. And what happens when they can't keep up is then you're pumping out adrenaline to supplement your stress response. And if you suppress your ability to make adrenal hormones, that problem tends to get worse. Not to mention, it worsens the steal from aldosterone and your sex hormones, which, if your adrenals aren't already keeping up with demand, then suppressing them just makes everything worse. So remember, chronic pain, inflammation, extreme fatigue, and inability to manage stressful situations without breaking on, basically the definition of burnout, are the consequences of not enough cortisol. So better to pick some of the techniques that I already mentioned above to help lower the demand for cortisol. And here's something that actually works better. It's really great to supplement your adrenals to make sure they have enough raw materials to work with. So I'll bring up our factory analogy again. So the car factory that's been co-opted to make tanks. If you think of our adrenal glands in that way, and the government is demanding more and more tanks because war is breaking out, and then the factory starts breaking down because there's a tool shortage or a small parts shortage or a raw material shortage. Sound familiar? Anybody tried to buy a fancy car lately? Since the factories can't get the computer chips, they can't make the cars. So some supplements that are really good to help your adrenals function better and make enough adrenal cortisol. So minerals in particular are important. So a good trace mineral supplement can be extremely helpful to support thyroid and adrenal function. It should supply iodine and selenium in the more optimal amounts. Also, in macro minerals are calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Those are also key, likely in higher amounts than you can get from food. And there is actually a nice combination supplement of those three that is great. Just remember to don't take calcium or iron close to when you take any thyroid hormone pills, as they impair the absorption of those. There are more supplements that can help in particular, there are adrenal glandulars. They can either be vegetarian or they can be made out of cleaned and dried animal adrenal glands. And I really strongly recommend one particular brand of that. It contains all the cofactors that your adrenal glands need to pump out the sterile hormones. And if you think of that factory analogy, those are kind of like the tools that the factory needs to replace from time to time in order to pump out the cortisol hormones, where the minerals might be the nuts and bolts. Those adrenal glandular supplements need to be taken at bedtime and at early AM to boost the natural circadian cycle of when your adrenals are making the cortisol. And then finally, hormone precursors. So if you're female, pregnenolone, and if you're male, DHEA, taken twice a day with the glandulars can make a huge difference when your adrenal glands aren't keeping up. And those are like a substitute for the raw materials. Say you can't get the steel to send to the manufacturing plant to make the parts. Well, if you can just buy the parts from somewhere else. So those are two hormones that are early in the synthesis chain, from cholesterol down to cortisol to estrogen to testosterone. So those two combined can really bring failing adrenal glands back to high gear. So it's important to really take it slow when you're starting these. One of the unusual and interesting symptoms of needing this kind of supplementation is not remembering your dreams. And when they come back, watch out. Technicolor, ask me how I know. And a steroid hormone profile from your doctor to follow along where you are is not a bad idea either. So if you have more questions like this, please feel free to email me at drgibbs@allergyaccessmd.com. Or if you're a physician listening to this and you need to discuss a patient with me, I actually do offer consultations, and you can email me at drgibbs@danagibbsmd.com. If you're a thyroid and chronic fatigue sufferer in North Texas and you want a caring doctor to help you resolve your exhaustion, frequent illness, joint muscle aches, and poor sleep issues, come sign up for a new patient evaluation. My website is www.danagibbsmd.com. Hey, it's been nice talking to you guys, and I'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.